Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. The voice on the other end of the encrypted line was as sterile as a morgue. You have 48 hours to be out of the country. After that, we can't guarantee your safety. In fact, we guarantee the opposite. A click, then silence. I didn't move. The only light in my cramped apartment came from the 3 monitors in front of me, their cool blue glow painting my face in the colors of anxiety. My name, or the name I used to have, was Alex Carter, online, in the dark corners where I lived and breathed. I was Cypher, and I had just kicked the biggest hornet's nest on the planet. 3 days ago, I'd completed the crowning achievement of my career. I'd slipped through the digital defenses of the Cers Corporation, a tech monolith with a private security force that made the FBI look like mall cops. I'd walked out with terabytes of data detailing their illegal arms deals, political bribery, and human rights abuses, and I'd gift-wrapped it for every major news outlet and watchdog agency I could find. It was the right thing to do. It was also suicide. My fingers, slick with sweat, trembled over the keyboard. I terminated the call, the silence in the room suddenly deafening. Every creak of the old building, every distant siren, sounded like them coming for me. 48 hours. My mind raced. I was a ghost online, but in the physical world, I was a 28-year-old man with a driver's license, a social security number, and a face they now knew. I spent the next hour diving into my own networks, the shadowy contacts I'd cultivated for years. I searched for every escape route imaginable: fake passports, smugglers' routes across the Canadian border, bribed cargo ship captains. Every option that came back was tagged with a digital skull and crossbones. High risk, compromised, tracked. Cerberus had eyes and ears everywhere. They had algorithms predicting my every move. Airports, shipping ports, even the grimiest back alley document forgers, they were all compromised. I was trapped in a digital cage of my own making. Desperation is a key that unlocks strange doors. In the deepest recesses of a dark web forum called Shadow Crossings, a thread title snagged my attention. It sounded like a B-movie Brides of the Rio Grande, the ultimate disappearing act. I clicked, my cynicism warring with a sliver of hope. I read with a growing sense of disbelief. It was a smuggling network, but one with a bizarre specialization. They transform men wanted by powerful enemies into women, blending them into the steady stream of legitimate female refugees and asylum seekers crossing the southern border into the United States. The idea was insane, a fever dream of a plan. But the testimonials, encrypted and verified, spoke for themselves. The success rate was astonishingly high. They're looking for a man. They'll never see the woman standing right in front of them. One comment read, "No one gives a second glance to another frightened girl. You become invisible," said another. I leaned back, the leather of my chair groaning in protest. I caught my reflection in the dark screen of a powered-down monitor. The face staring back wasn't exactly a rugged specimen of masculinity. I was 5'8", 130 pounds soaking wet. My life as a programmer had left me with a slender build, narrow shoulders, and hands made for a keyboard. Not a fist fight. My jaw wasn't square, my features were fine, I suppose, soft. A sudden sweep of headlights flashed across my window, slicing through the darkness. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I killed the monitors instantly, plunging the room into absolute black. I held my breath, listening. A car engine hummed, then faded down the street. It was probably nothing. A pizza delivery, a late-night commuter. But the message was clear. My time was a lit fuse burning down to nothing. I powered the monitors back on. The forum was still open. I couldn't afford to hesitate. 2 hours later, after liquidating every cryptocurrency account I had and routing the funds through a dozen anonymous tumblers, I sent an encrypted message to the contact listed on the forum. "I need your services immediately. I can pay." The reply came in less than 5 minutes, my computer chiming softly in the suffocating silence. "Be at this location, 2 a.m., bring $15,000 in cash and a recent photograph of yourself. Come alone." An address followed an all-night laundromat in an industrial part of the city. I looked at the picture on my expired passport, the face of Alex Carter, a face that was about to die. The safe house was a dilapidated bungalow on the frayed edge of the city, smelling of dust and bleach. The woman who met me at the door introduced herself as Rosa. She was in her late 50s, with shrewd dark eyes that sized me up not as a person, but as a project. She looked at me the way a sculptor looks at a block of clay, seeing not what was there, but what could be carved out of it. "You're lucky," she said, her Spanish-accented English clipping the words. "Your face is soft, not too much beard shadow, and the eyes, those eyes could be very pretty." I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. How long does the process take?" 3 days for the basic training," she said, leading me into a Spartan living room. "Another week for the body to adjust, if you want to be safer." She pulled a small box from a locked cabinet. Inside, nestled in foam, were vials of clear liquid and a handful of syringes. "This is estradiol, estrogen, a female hormone. It will soften your skin, slow your body hair growth. If you're lucky, your chest will start to get tender, maybe even swell a little, just enough to be convincing." The sight of the needles made my stomach clench. But the side effects— nausea, mood swings, your sex drive might disappear, she said with a shrug, her tone utterly pragmatic. But compared to a bullet in the head, what choice do you have? She looked me straight in the eye, and I knew she was right. The air in the room felt thick, heavy. My hand trembled as I reached for the box. This was it, the absolute point of no return. "Okay," I whispered, the word barely audible. "I'll do it." Rosa administered the first shot herself that evening. The needle slid into the muscle of my thigh with a sharp, stinging pain, but the physical discomfort was nothing compared to the tidal wave of panic crashing through my mind. With that single injection, a chemical process had begun that I couldn't stop. I was actively, willingly unmaking myself. The next 3 days were a disorienting, surreal blur, a nightmare boot camp for a new life. Rosa and her assistant, a transgender woman named Carla who moved with a quiet, confident grace, began the slow, meticulous process of erasing Alex Carter. Day 1, the canvas. The first order of business was my body hair. Carla laid out towels on the bathroom floor with the efficiency of a surgeon. "Women are not hairy like men. Chico," she said gently, one by one. She took a razor and shaving cream to my legs, my arms, my chest. The feeling of the blade scraping away the fine hair I'd had my entire adult life was profoundly unsettling. Afterwards, she slathered me in a chemical depilatory cream to ensure the skin was perfectly smooth. I looked down at my own body and felt a dizzying sense of detachment, as if I were looking at a stranger. Next came my hair and face. My short brown hair was painstakingly lengthened with dark, wavy extensions that fell just past my shoulders. Carla showed me how to brush it, how to make it look natural. Then she came at me with a pair of tweezers. "Your eyebrows are too thick, too straight," she murmured, and began plucking and shaping them into a softer, more delicate arch. Each tweeze was a tiny spark of pain. "Now look in the mirror," Rosa commanded when it was done. I lifted my head and my breath caught in my throat. The reflection was wrong. It was my face. But it wasn't. The structure was the same, but the framing had changed everything. The longer hair softened my jawline. The arched brows made my eyes seem larger, more open. Carla then applied a light, natural makeup, a touch of foundation to even my skin tone, a hint of mascara to lengthen my lashes, a nude gloss on my lips. The final effect was shocking. The face in the mirror wasn't Alex anymore. It was someone else. Someone feminine. "Your new name is Lucia," Rosa announced, as if christening a ship. "Lucia Marquez, you are 24 years old. You are from Guatemala, fleeing an abusive husband. That is your story. Memorize it, live it." Day 2, the performance. Carla taught me how to walk. "Stop striding like you're trying to conquer the world," she instructed, her voice patient but firm. "Shorter steps, lighter, let your hips move. Don't force it, just let it happen." I spent hours pacing the length of the living room in a pair of scuffed, low heels. I stumbled, my ankles wobbled, and my feet screamed in agony. But Carla was relentless, clapping her hands every time I managed a few steps that looked fluid and natural. The voice was the hardest part. "Speak from your throat, not your chest," she said, touching her own neck. "The sound needs to be softer, higher. Try this, hola." Me llamo Lucia. The first sounds that came out of my mouth were a grotesque, strangled croak. I felt a hot flush of shame. It was ridiculous, but we worked for hours, going through pitch and inflection exercises until my throat was raw. Slowly, painstakingly, I began to find a new register, a new voice that wasn't Alex's baritone. It was the voice of Lucia. Day 3, the soul. Men and women show their feelings in different ways. Rosa lectured, pacing in front of me as I sat on a stool. Women smile more. They nod when they listen to show they are paying attention. They argue less directly. And don't stare. It is aggressive. Lower your eyes sometimes. Show a little humility. It is a shield. I practiced in front of a mirror, smiling until my cheeks ached. Nodding, touching my cheek in a gesture of shyness. Every move felt like a lie. A costume I was putting on. Rosa corrected every detail, adjusting the tilt of my head, the way I held my hands. On the evening of the third day, Rosa brought in a simple floral sundress and a pair of flat sandals. "Put these on," she ordered. "From this moment, you are only Lucia. You will eat, sleep, and speak only as Lucia. Alex Carter is dead." I slipped the dress over my head. The cotton fabric was light and airy against my newly smooth skin. It felt alien, exposing my legs and arms in a way I never had before. I looked in the mirror. The person staring back was a complete stranger, a slender, dark-haired girl with frightened eyes. My eyes. That night, Lucia Marquez took her second hormone injection. I did it myself, my hand shaking as I pushed the plunger, the estrogen flooding my system. A wave of nausea rolled over me, followed by a strange, tingling warmth. My body was changing. The old me was dissolving, molecule by molecule. In the week that followed, waiting for the transport to be arranged, the changes became undeniable. My skin felt softer, more sensitive to the touch. The faint scent of my male sweat was replaced by something subtler, almost sweet. And then came the pain in my chest. It started as a dull ache, a tenderness around the nipples. Soon, it became a constant, throbbing sensitivity. When I brushed against a door frame, a jolt of pain shot through me. I looked down at my chest and saw it a slight but definite swelling. My breasts were beginning to develop. The physical changes were terrifying, but the emotional ones were worse. I found myself crying at a sad song on the radio when Carla praised my improving walk. A surge of genuine, giddy pleasure washed over me, an emotion so foreign to the stoic, cynical cipher that it felt like a violation. I was losing control. The carefully constructed walls of my old self were crumbling, and I didn't know who or what was going to be left in the rubble. The call to leave came sooner than expected. Rosa burst into my room late one night, her face grim. "News on the wire. Cerberus has a team sniffing around the border towns. You have to go. Tonight." Panic, cold and sharp, seized me. I wasn't ready. My walk was still clumsy. My voice sometimes cracked and dropped into its old register when I was tired, but there was no choice. Within the hour, Lucia was bundled into the back of a sweltering cargo truck with 12 other people. The air was thick with the smell of sweat, fear, and unwashed bodies. I was pressed between a weary-looking grandmother and a young woman my age named Anna, who clutched a sleeping toddler to her chest. I pulled my thin shawl tighter around myself, trying to disappear into the corner. "Is this your first time crossing?" Anna whispered to me in Spanish, her voice trembling slightly. I just nodded, afraid to speak and betray myself. "Don't be scared," she said, offering a weak, exhausted smile. "We will be okay. God is with us." The journey was a 3-day, 3-night descent into a waking nightmare. The truck rumbled over dusty, unpaved roads, tossing us around like laundry in a machine. During the day, the heat in the metal container was suffocating, well over 100 degrees. At night, when they finally let us out to walk across stretches of open desert, the temperature plummeted, and the cold seeped into my bones. I learned to cry without making a sound, tears tracing silent paths through the dust on my cheeks as my feet, raw and blistered inside my cheap sandals, throbbed with every step. I learned to survive on sips of shared water and stale tortillas. The hormones were wreaking havoc on my system. I'd be hit with sudden, drenching hot flashes in the middle of the freezing night. my emotions swinging wildly from abject terror to a hollow, numb despair. But something else happened in that shared darkness and misery. I started to feel a connection. When the grandmother's legs gave out, Anna and I helped carry her. When Anna's little girl began to cry from hunger, another woman shared the last of her fruit. We were a fragile, desperate family, bound by a common hope. I, who had spent my entire life isolated behind screens, felt a sense of belonging that was as terrifying as it was comforting. I was no longer an observer. I was one of them, one of the women. On the third night, our guides, the coyotes, led us to the banks of the Rio Grande. It wasn't a grand river, but a churning, muddy ribbon of black water that flowed with a dangerous current. The moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the only light came from the distant glow of a Texas town on the other side, America. They handed each of us a tattered black inner tube. "Get across, fast," one of the men grunted, shoving us toward the water. The shock of the cold water stole my breath. It was a physical blow, sucking the warmth from my body in an instant. The current was strong, pulling at my legs, trying to drag me under. I clung to the inner tube, my knuckles white, kicking frantically all around me. There was chaos, people shouting, children crying. I saw Anna struggling nearby, trying to hold her daughter's head above the water while keeping her own grip on her tube. The little girl slipped, her head going under, without thinking. I let go of my own tube and swam the few feet toward them. "Give her to me," I screamed, the sound ripping from my raw throat. It wasn't the practiced, soft voice of Lucia. It was the terrified shriek of a woman fighting for a child's life. I grabbed the little girl, pulling her sputtering and coughing against my chest, and held on to Anna's inner tube with my other hand. Together, the three of us kicked and fought our way through the current. I don't know how long it took. Time dissolved into a blur of cold, fear, and burning muscles. Finally, my feet hit mud. I scrambled onto the American bank, coughing up foul river water, my clothes plastered to my body. I had made it. We were in America. The relief lasted for less than a second. Bright beams of light blinded us. A voice, amplified and harsh, cut through the night in English. "Border Patrol, hands on your head, do it now." I raised my hands, my body shaking uncontrollably from cold and fear. We were herded together, wrapped in foil blankets, and loaded into vans. But just as Rosa had predicted, the system was too overwhelmed to hold us. We were processed as asylum seekers, given a court date years in the future, and then, after a few hours in a crowded, sterile holding cell, we were simply released onto the streets of a small border town. As I stood blinking in the morning sun, a man holding a cardboard sign that read Lucia Marquez approached me. He nodded curtly. "Welcome to Texas," he said in Spanish. "My name is Miguel. I'm here to take you to your job." The restaurant was called El Fuego, the Fire. It sat on the main street of Del Rio, a small Texas town where the dust seemed to settle on everything and life moved at the pace of the slow-moving heat. The building was painted a cheerful, sun-faded yellow, and the air around it was thick with the delicious, comforting smell of grilled meat and roasting chilies. A woman who looked to be in her 50s, with a warm, round face and eyes that missed nothing, met me at the door. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked me over from head to toe. "So you are my new girl," she said, her voice a mix of maternal warmth and no-nonsense authority. This was Elena, the owner. "You are too skinny. We will need to feed you." I lowered my eyes, just as Rosa had taught me. "Yes, ma'am, thank you for having me." "Here, we are family," she declared, placing a firm but gentle hand on my shoulder. "You work hard for me, and I will take care of you. You understand?" "Yes, ma'am." Elena led me through the bustling kitchen to a small, clean room at the back. It held a simple twin bed, a worn wooden dresser, and a tiny window that looked out onto a dusty alley. "This is your home now," she said. "Rest today. You start work tomorrow morning." The next morning, I woke in a state of profound confusion. For a few seconds, I had no idea where I was. Then, the memories of the last few weeks crashed down on me, the threat, the escape, the crossing, the new name. I was Lucia. I sat up and saw the uniform Elena had left for me on a chair, a plain white blouse, black server's pants, and a red apron with El Fuego embroidered on it. As I got dressed, I confronted a new reality. My chest was so tender and swollen now that the thin fabric of the blouse was uncomfortable against my skin. In the small bag of belongings Rosa had given me, there was a simple, non-wired cotton bra. I put it on, my fingers fumbling with the clasp at the back. The feeling of the straps on my shoulders and the fabric encasing my chest was utterly alien. It was a physical, undeniable marker of the change I was undergoing. It wasn't a costume. It was a necessity. Walking into the kitchen, the smell of frying onions and peppers was so strong it made my head spin. A cheerful young woman in her early 20s named Maria waved a spatula at me. "Hi, Lucia, ready for your first day? We'll start you on dishwashing." The work was hard and monotonous. I spent hours standing in front of a giant industrial sink, my hands plunged into steaming, soapy water until my skin was red and puckered. But there was a strange peace in the rhythm of it. My mind, which for weeks had been a chaotic storm of fear and planning, went quiet. There was only the simple repetitive motion scrub, rinse, stack. "You're doing great," Maria said, handing me a warm corn tortilla during a break. "You need to eat. Keep your energy up." During the lunch rush, the restaurant filled with the noise of happy customers, Elena decided I was ready for the front. "Do not be scared," she said, tying my apron for me. "Just smile, write down what they want, and bring the food. That is all." My heart pounded against my ribs as I picked up a notepad and walked into the dining room. My first table was a family with 2 young children. The mother smiled at me kindly. "Hi, honey, we're ready to order." I wrote down their order, my hand shaking so badly the letters were almost illegible. My voice came out as a quiet, wavering whisper, but nobody noticed. To them, I was just another young, slightly nervous waitress. Every time I carried a heavy tray of sizzling fajitas, I focused on not letting my hands tremble. Every time someone called out, "Lucia," it took me a second to realize they were talking to me, but slowly, with each passing hour, the name began to stick. The first real test came that afternoon. A group of 3 men in dark suits walked in. They looked completely out of place in this sleepy town, their crisp attire a stark contrast to the jeans and work boots of the local ranchers. My blood ran cold. Cerberus. My hands shook as I filled their water glasses, my head down, my hair falling forward to hide my face. One of them looked up as I set his glass down. "Thank you, miss," he said with a polite smile. His English was unaccented American. I lingered by the kitchen door, straining to hear their conversation. They were talking about land deeds, zoning permits, real estate investments. They were just developers. My shoulders slumped in relief, but the fear lingered, a cold knot in my stomach. The past was a shadow that would always be stalking me. That evening, after the last customer had left, Elena insisted I sit and eat with the staff, Maria, Elena, and the 2 cooks sat around a large table in the dining room, sharing a simple meal of leftover tacos and rice. As I listened to their easy laughter and rapid-fire Spanish, a strange warmth spread through my chest. "Lucia," Elena asked gently, "do you have family back in Guatemala?" I hesitated, the fabricated story ready on my tongue. "No," I said quietly, the lie feeling uncomfortably close to the truth. "Not anymore." Elena reached across the table and patted my hand. "Well, now we are your family." I felt a sudden sharp sting behind my eyes. I looked down at my plate, pretending to be focused on my food, fighting back tears. Alex Carter never had a family. Cypher was pathologically alone. But Lucia was sitting at a table surrounded by people who were being kind to her for no other reason than that she was there. Later that night, lying in my small bed, I placed a hand over my aching chest. The small swell of breast tissue beneath my palm was a testament to the irreversible path I was on. I stared up at the cracked ceiling and asked the darkness the question that was consuming me. Who am I? Am I Cypher? Am I Lucia? Am I some monstrous hybrid of the two? For the first time in a very long time, I didn't have an answer. But for the first time in a very long time, I also wasn't running. The days melted into weeks. Life at El Fuego settled into a rhythm that became the anchor of my existence. I'd wake at dawn, shower, and then stand in front of the small mirror in my room for the new ritual that had replaced checking security feeds, putting on my face. It was no longer about a disguise, it was about maintenance. A little concealer under the eyes, a quick brush of mascara, a sheer pink lip gloss that Elena had bought for me. "You look pretty when you smile, mija," she'd said. "A little color helps." These small acts of femininity were becoming second nature, motions my hands performed without conscious thought. My body continued its quiet, relentless transformation. The tender aches in my chest had given way to a noticeable fullness. I was filling out a small A-cup bra now, and had to buy more. My skin was ridiculously soft, and I had to start using lotion to stop it from getting dry. The most significant change was my voice. I no longer had to consciously pitch it higher. The estrogen had subtly altered my vocal cords, and my natural speaking voice had settled into a softer, lighter tenor that was believably female. "You are blossoming," Elena commented one afternoon, pinching my cheek. "You have color in your face. You look healthy." I smiled, a genuine, unforced smile. "It's your cooking, Elena." But inside, I knew it was more than that. I was still taking the hormones, a secret ritual I performed once a week in the privacy of my locked room. I'd found a contact through the same network that brought me here, an underground doctor who supplied me with vials of estradiol in exchange for cash wired to an offshore account. The weekly injection was a painful, clandestine link to my old life, a reminder that my new reality was built on a foundation of chemistry and lies. One Friday afternoon, during the dinner rush, I noticed a man sitting alone at a table in the corner. He wasn't a local. I'd memorized most of their faces by now. He was in his mid-30s, tall and lean with sun-weathered skin and kind eyes. He was watching me, but not in the leering way some of the roughnecks from the oil fields did. His gaze was curious, gentle. "Hi there," he said when I approached his table, his voice a low, pleasant Texas drawl. "I'll just have the carne asada and an iced tea, please." "Of course," I replied, my practiced English still feeling a little stiff. "You new here?" he asked, his smile friendly. "Yes, I have only been working here a few weeks." "I'm David," he said, extending a hand across the table. His hand was warm and calloused, engulfing mine completely. "I come here a lot. The food's the best in town." "I am Lucia," I said, pulling my hand away, my skin tingling from the brief contact. After that, David became a regular fixture. He'd come in 2 or 3 times a week, always sitting in my section, always making polite, easy conversation. He was a civil engineer, he told me, working on a highway expansion project nearby. He'd ask about my day, tell me a funny story about his work crew, and always leave a generous tip. "You have an admirer," Maria teased me one day, winking as David left. I felt a blush creep up my neck. "No, he's just friendly." But I knew it was more than that, and it terrified me. Every time David walked through the door, my heart did a strange little flip-flop in my chest. It wasn't the cold jolt of fear I felt when I thought of Cerberus. It was something else, something warm and confusing and entirely new. It was the feeling of being seen, of being noticed, as a woman. One Friday night, David stayed late, nursing a coffee until we were cleaning up to close. When I brought him his check, he looked up at me, a hopeful, slightly nervous expression on his face. "Lucia," he started, "I was wondering if you're not too tired after your shift. Would you maybe want to get a coffee somewhere else? I froze, the checkbook still in my hand. My mind screamed danger getting close to someone. Letting them into my life was the stupidest thing I could do. It was a security risk of the highest order. But then I looked at his eyes, so open and sincere, and a part of me, a part that felt more like Lucia than Cypher, desperately wanted to say yes. I don't know," I stammered. "I have to finish cleaning." "I can wait," he said with a patient smile. Elena, who had been wiping down the bar nearby, walked over and patted my shoulder. "Go, Lucia, we can finish up here. A young girl should have some fun." We went to a small, 24-hour diner a few blocks away. I sat across from him in a worn vinyl booth, clutching a warm mug of decaf like a life raft. This was the first time I had been alone with a man in a social setting since my transformation. It was a test, and I was sure I would fail. "Elena said you were from Guatemala," David said, stirring his own coffee. "Yes," I said, reciting the lie that was becoming my truth. I told him the story Rosa had invented about the abusive husband, the desperate flight to a new life. As the words left my lips, a strange thing happened. The emotions felt real. The fear of being hunted, the desperation of starting over. I didn't have to fake those things. I was channeling the genuine terror of Alex Carter into the narrative of Lucia Marquez. David listened without interrupting, his expression full of a deep, disarming empathy. "I'm so sorry you had to go through that," he said when I finished. "But you're incredibly brave. Lucia, to come all this way by yourself and start a new life, that takes a kind of strength most people don't have." I looked down into my cup. I don't know if it was bravery. I didn't have another choice. "Sometimes that's what bravery is," he said softly. "Doing what you have to do when you're out of choices." He skillfully changed the subject then, talking about his own life, his work, his love for the wide-open Texas sky. He was easy to talk to, never pushing for more information than I was willing to give. I found myself relaxing, even laughing at one of his jokes about a runaway bulldozer. When he walked me back to the restaurant, the streets were quiet. Under the dim glow of a street lamp, he stopped at the door. "I had a really nice time tonight, Lucia," he said, his voice low. "Maybe we could do it again sometime." I hesitated for a heartbeat, my internal alarm still ringing faintly. Then I gave a small nod. "I would like that." David smiled, a slow, warm smile that made my stomach flutter again. He leaned in, and for a terrifying second, I thought he was going to kiss me on the lips. Instead, he placed a gentle, fleeting kiss on my cheek. "Good night, Lucia." He turned and walked away. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, my fingers tracing the spot on my cheek where his lips had been. It felt like it was burning. My heart was hammering, my face was hot, and a voice in the back of my head, a voice that sounded a lot like Alex Carter, was screaming, "What in the hell are you doing?" The next month was a strange and delicate dance. During the day, I was Lucia, the diligent waitress at El Fuego. My Spanish improved, my friendship with Maria deepened, and my place in Elena's little family felt more and more secure. At night, I was Lucia, the woman getting to know David. We went for walks. He took me to a local movie theater. We sat by the creek that ran through the edge of town and talked for hours. Our relationship progressed with a sweet, old-fashioned slowness. He never pushed for more than I was willing to give. He'd hold my hand when we walked, his thumb gently stroking my knuckles. He'd put an arm around my shoulder when the evening got chilly. Every small touch was a jolt to my system, a terrifying and exhilarating reminder of the new person I was becoming. I was grateful for his patience, because I had no idea how I would react if he tried to take things further. My body was a landscape of secrets, and I didn't know how to let him explore it. Meanwhile, that landscape continued to shift. The hormones were working their relentless magic. My chest had swelled to a point where I now comfortably filled a B-cup bra. My hips and thighs had softened, gaining a subtle curve that hadn't been there before. When I looked at my naked reflection now, the image was undeniably female. The slim, androgynous body of Alex was gone, replaced by the soft curve form of Lucia. The change was both fascinating and deeply disturbing. One evening, Maria dragged me to a thrift store downtown. "You can't wear your work clothes on your dates with David," she insisted. "You need something spicy." She pulled a simple, form-fitting red dress from a rack and pushed me toward the dressing room. "Try it on." I slipped it on reluctantly. It was a sleeveless sheath dress that ended just above my knees. The fabric clung to my body in a way I wasn't used to, outlining my waist, my hips, and the new fullness of my chest. I stared at myself in the full-length mirror, my breath catching in my throat. I looked like a woman, not just a convincing imitation, but an actual, attractive woman. The dress showcased the changes I had been so afraid of, turning them into something that was, to my shock, beautiful. "Oh my God, Lucia, you look incredible," Maria whistled when I stepped out. "You have to buy it. David's eyes will pop out of his head." I felt a hot blush spread across my entire body, a mixture of acute embarrassment and a strange, unfamiliar flicker of pride. I bought the dress, along with a pair of simple black heels. That night, I tried them on again in my room, walking back and forth in front of my small mirror. The click of the heels on the linoleum floor sounded like a countdown. I wasn't just hiding anymore. I was inhabiting this new life, this new body, in a way that felt thrilling and incredibly dangerous. The bubble of my fragile new reality was bound to pop. It happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. I was wiping down tables when Elena called me into her tiny back office. "Lucia, the cash register is broken," she said. Frustration etched on her face. "It won't print receipts. The repairman can't come until next week. I don't suppose you know anything about these machines." My body went rigid. It was a simple point-of-sale system, ancient by my standards, running on a pirated copy of Windows XP. To Cipher, fixing it would be as easy as breathing, but to Lucia, the refugee from Guatemala. I can look," I said, my voice barely a whisper. My mind raced. Helping could expose me, but not helping would hurt Elena's business. I sat down at the machine. The familiar interface was almost comforting. My fingers, acting on years of instinct, flew across the keyboard. I opened the command prompt, checked the error logs, diagnosed a corrupted printer driver, found a stable version online, and installed it. The whole process took less than 10 minutes. I printed a test receipt. It worked perfectly. "It is fixed," I said, standing up quickly, trying to act casual. Elena stared at me, her eyes wide with astonishment. "My goodness, child, where did you learn to do that?" "Oh, I just picked some things up from the internet cafes back home," I lied, my heart hammering. "It is just a hobby." "You are full of surprises," she said, beaming, completely unsuspecting. But I knew I had made a critical error. I had let the mask slip. I had shown a sliver of Cipher in a place where only Lucia should exist. I had to be more careful. That night, as I was locking up, a black sedan with tinted windows pulled up to the curb. My entire body went on high alert. A tall man in his 40s, wearing an impeccably tailored gray suit, got out. He moved with the predatory stillness of a wolf. He pushed open the door and his eyes scanned the empty restaurant before locking onto me. "Are you still open?" he asked. His English was perfect, clipped, with no trace of a regional accent. "I am sorry, sir, we are closing," I said, my voice tight. My hand was shaking as I clutched the keys. "I just need a quick cup of coffee to go," he said, offering a smile that was all teeth. It didn't reach his cold, calculating eyes. Of course." My hands trembled as I poured the coffee into a paper cup. He sat at a table near the door, watching my every move. "You've been working here long?" he asked conversationally. "No, sir, not very long." "What's your name?" "Lucia." "Lucia," he repeated, tasting the name. "And where are you from, Lucia?" "Guatemala, sir." He nodded slowly, taking a sip of his coffee. "My name is Davies," he said. "I'm in town looking for someone. A man, about your height, slender build, very, very good with computers. He may have changed his appearance." The air was sucked from my lungs. I felt dizzy, like I was going to faint. I gripped the edge of the counter to steady myself. This was it. They had found me. I have not seen anyone like that," I managed to say. "This is a very quiet town." Davies stared at me, his gaze so intense it felt like he was peeling back my skin, trying to see the terrified man hiding underneath. The silence stretched for an eternity. "Well," he finally said, standing up, "if you do see or hear anything suspicious, give me a call." He placed a business card on the counter. "There's a substantial reward." I picked up the card. It had only a name Davies and a long string of numbers. No company, no address. He placed a $10 bill on the counter. "Thank you for the coffee. Lucia." He gave me one last lingering look, and then he was gone, the black sedan melting into the night. I stood there for a long time, the business card clutched in my hand, my body shaking so violently I had to lean against the wall for support. The shadow had found me. The past was no longer at my back. It was standing on my doorstep. That night, sleep was an impossibility. I lay on my narrow bed, staring into the oppressive darkness, my mind a maelstrom of terror. The easy answer was to run, to pack my small bag, disappear into the night, and start the entire process over again in some other town, with some other name. But the thought of leaving was a physical pain. Leaving El Fuego, leaving Elena and Maria, leaving David. The life I had built here, a life constructed from lies, had somehow become the only true thing I had. I couldn't run from it, not again. A cold resolve settled over me. Alex Carter ran, Cipher hid, but Lucia Lucia would fight, not with guns or fists, but with the only weapon I had ever truly mastered. I would fight them from the shadows, using their own technology against them. The next day, I asked Elena if I could use the office computer during my lunch breaks. To practice my English, I said, my voice soft and earnest. She was delighted. Of course, mija, anything to help you learn. Sitting in front of that outdated PC, I felt a familiar surge of power. This was my world. I downloaded a Tor browser, routed my connection through a chain of encrypted VPNs that bounced my signal across 3 continents, and slipped back into the dark web. I became Cypher again. I started digging. I knew my data leak had hurt Cerberus, but I needed to know how badly. It took me 2 days of meticulous, patient hacking, slipping through the cracks in their damaged firewalls. But I found what I was looking for. The company wasn't just wounded, it was tearing itself apart. My leak had triggered a massive internal power struggle between the sociopathic CEO and his equally ruthless board of directors. And beneath that conflict, I found the real treasure a massive, off-the-books financial fraud they were all trying to cover up, a crime far bigger than anything I had previously exposed. They weren't just hunting a hacker, they were trying to plug a hole in a sinking ship before they all drowned. That was my opening. I wouldn't attack them directly. That would be too noisy. Instead, I would become a whisper campaign from hell. I would leak the new information slowly, piece by piece, from dozens of different anonymous sources. I would make it look like they were being attacked from all sides, that their internal security was a sieve. I would fan the flames of their paranoia until they were too busy fighting each other to worry about a ghost in a Texas diner. My life became a bizarre duality. By day, I was Lucia, smiling at customers, worrying about David, learning to cook enchiladas from Elena. By night, after everyone had gone home, I would lock myself in the office for 1 precious hour and become Cypher, a digital saboteur waging a silent war against a global corporation. I sent encrypted emails to financial journalists. I dropped incriminating documents onto investor forums. I fed anonymous tips to the Securities and Exchange Commission. All the while, my relationship with David was becoming more serious, more real. The threat of Davies lurking in the background made every moment with him feel precious and fragile. One Saturday night, he took me to a nicer restaurant in the next town over for a real date. I decided to wear the red dress, standing in front of the mirror, applying a bit of mascara and a touch of red lipstick to match the dress. I felt a tremor of both fear and excitement. This was the most daring I had ever been as Lucia. When I walked out of the back room to meet him, David was leaning against his truck. He saw me, and his jaw literally dropped. He just stared for a moment. "Lucia," he breathed, his voice thick with awe. "Wow, you look beautiful." A wave of heat washed over my face, but for the first time, it wasn't just embarrassment, it was pleasure. Over dinner, the conversation felt deeper than before. He told me about his parents, who had died in a car crash when he was a teenager, and how he'd been raised by his grandmother. He talked about how lonely it could be in a town like Del Rio, where you knew everyone's name but not their heart. "Until I met you," he said, his eyes meeting mine across the table. His gaze was so direct, so sincere. It felt like it was looking right through the facade and into my soul. "You're different, Lucia. There's a depth to you, a sadness, maybe, but a strength, too. I feel like I can talk to you about anything." I swallowed hard, my carefully constructed walls feeling paper thin. I feel that way, too. After dinner, he drove us to a quiet spot by the creek. We got out and walked along the bank, the only sounds the chirping of crickets and the gentle murmur of the water. The moon was bright, casting a silver glow over everything. He took my hand, his fingers intertwining with mine. He stopped walking and turned to face me. "Lucia," he said, his voice quiet but intense. "I know we haven't known each other that long, and I know you have a past that you don't like to talk about, but I need you to know how I feel." He took a deep breath. "I think I'm falling in love with you." The world stopped. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic, trapped thing. These were the words I had been dreading. The words that would make the lies between us unbearable. This kind. good man was falling in love with a fabrication, an identity I had worn for survival. "You don't have to say anything back," he said quickly, misinterpreting my shocked silence. I needed to tell you." Before I could process what was happening, before I could think, Lucia took over. Or maybe it wasn't Lucia, maybe it was just me. I stepped forward, rose onto my toes, and silenced him with a kiss. It was my first kiss as Lucia. It was the first real kiss of my life. Alex Carter had never been with anyone, too consumed by his work, too paranoid to let anyone get close. The kiss was tentative at first, then deepened as he responded, his arms wrapping around me, pulling me close. His lips were warm and soft. He held me carefully, almost reverently, as if he were afraid I might break. When we finally pulled apart, I was breathless. I looked up at him, at the wonder in his eyes, and the words tumbled out before I could stop them. "I think I'm falling in love with you too." And the most terrifying part was, it wasn't a lie. In that moment, it was the truest thing I had ever said. The person I had become, this woman named Lucia, was completely in love with David. When he dropped me off at the restaurant later, he kissed me again at the door, a deep, lingering kiss that left me dizzy and weak in the knees. His hand slid down my back, pressing me against him, and my body responded with a jolt of pure, unadulterated want that was completely new and utterly terrifying. "Good night, my Lucia," he whispered against my lips. I stumbled back to my room in a daze, my body humming with sensations I had never felt before. I closed the door, slid down against it, and touched my swollen lips. Then, the tears came, hot, silent tears of joy and guilt and terror. I was living a beautiful lie, falling for a man who didn't know the first thing about who I really was. And I knew, with a dreadful certainty, that it was all going to come crashing down. 2 months after Mr. Davies's visit, the world outside Del Rio erupted. The Cers Corporation became the center of a massive financial scandal. The slow, steady drip of information I'd been leaking had coalesced into a flood. News channels ran endless stories about corruption, fraud, and corporate espionage. The CEO was forced to resign in disgrace, and 3 board members were indicted by federal agents. The company was in a death spiral. I watched the news reports on the small TV in the restaurant's break room, a cold sense of victory mixing with the constant hum of my personal anxiety. My plan had worked better than I could have imagined. Cerberus was too busy trying to save itself to hunt for a ghost from its past. The external threat, the one that had created Lucia, was gone. But the internal one remained. My relationship with David had grown deeper, more intimate. He was a constant presence in my life now, helping me lock up the restaurant, bringing me coffee in the mornings, holding my hand as we walked. The kisses became more frequent, more passionate, but every time he touched me, every time he looked at me with that open, trusting love in his eyes, the guilt twisted inside me like a knife. He deserved the truth. He deserved to know the person he was falling in love with. One night, after a particularly lovely evening, he invited me back to his apartment for the first time. It was a small, clean place filled with books and blueprints. I knew what this invitation meant. It was the next step, a natural progression in a relationship, a step I couldn't take while hiding such a monumental secret. The lies had to end, right here, right now. We were sitting on his comfortable, worn-out sofa when I finally found the courage. "David," I said, my voice shaking so hard I could barely form the words, "I have to tell you something." He turned to me, his expression immediately filled with concern. "What is it, Lucia? Are you okay?" I took a deep, shuddering breath. This was it, the moment I either became truly free or lost everything. "I'm not who you think I am," I began, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. "Or I am, but it's more complicated." He just watched me, his brow furrowed in confusion. Waiting? My name, it wasn't always Lucia Marquez. I'm not from Guatemala. The tears I'd been fighting started to fall, hot and fast. I come from a very different past. I did things that made very dangerous people want to hurt me to survive. I had to run. I had to disappear. I had to change. David remained silent, his gaze unwavering. "I was born a man," I finally choked out. The two words I feared most in the world. My name was Alex. I was a computer hacker. I uncovered something I shouldn't have, and they came after me. I gestured helplessly at my body, my clothes, my face. This was a disguise, a way to cross the border, to become invisible. I took hormones. I learned to walk, to talk. I became Lucia to survive. The silence in the room was absolute, a crushing weight. David's face was a blank mask, completely unreadable. But the one thing that wasn't a lie, I whispered, my voice thick with desperation, was how I feel about you. That part is real. Whatever I am, whoever I am, falling in love with you is the only real thing that has ever happened to me. He didn't speak. He just slowly stood up, walked over to the sliding glass door, and stepped out onto his small balcony, leaving me alone in the suffocating silence. I sat there, paralyzed, my body trembling, waiting for the verdict. This was the end. He would come back in, his face filled with disgust and betrayal, and tell me to get out. I had destroyed the one good thing in my life. 1 minute passed, then 2, then 5. It felt like a lifetime. Finally, he came back inside. His eyes were red-rimmed, his face etched with a confusion and pain that mirrored my own. I need some time to process this, he said, his voice strained. I understand, I whispered, gathering my purse, my movements stiff and robotic. I should go. As I reached the door, he called out my name. Lucia, he said, then hesitated. Or Alex. I turned back, tears streaming down my face, my heart shattered. I don't know, I sobbed. I don't know who I am anymore. Just give me some time, he said, his voice barely audible. I need to think. The week that followed was the longest of my life. David didn't come to the restaurant. He didn't call. He didn't text. The silence was a definitive answer. I had lost him. I went through the motions of my job like an automaton, serving food with a smile plastered on my face while inside I was hollowed out with grief. Elena and Maria knew something was wrong, but I just brushed off their concerned questions with a weak, I'm just tired. Every night, I cried myself to sleep. I had been a fool to think I could have this. A life, a family, love. I was a fraud, and this was my punishment. Then, on Friday evening, just as we were about to close, the bell on the restaurant door jingled. David walked in. I froze behind the counter, my heart ceasing to beat. He walked straight toward me, his expression serious. I've been doing a lot of thinking, he said, his voice low and steady. David, I understand if you hate me, if you want me to. Let me finish. He interrupted gently. Oh, please. I've been thinking about everything you told me, about Alex, about the danger you were in, about all of it, and I kept coming back to one simple fact. He reached out and, with a startling tenderness, used his thumb to wipe a tear from my cheek that I hadn't even realized had fallen. I love you, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Not a memory, not a name from the past. I love you, the woman who has been standing in front of me for the last few months, the woman who is kind and strong and who laughs at my stupid jokes. Your soul, your heart, that's what I fell in love with. The rest, it's just a story. It's the story of how you got here, to me. I stared at him, unable to breathe, unable to believe what I was hearing. But aren't you disgusted that I was... Disgusted? He shook his head, a small, sad smile on his lips. How could I be disgusted by someone who is brave enough to do whatever it took to survive, someone who fought their way through hell just to have a life? He took my hands in his. I don't understand all of it, the hormones, what it feels like. I don't get it all, but I want to. I want to learn. I just know that I don't want to face another day without you. And with that, he pulled me into his arms. I collapsed against his chest, sobbing uncontrollably, not with grief, but with a tidal wave of cathartic relief so powerful it buckled my knees. He just held me, stroking my hair, whispering, "It's okay, we're okay." For the first time in my entire life, someone knew the whole, ugly, complicated truth about me, and they hadn't run away. After a long moment, I pulled back, my face a mess of tears and smeared makeup. Do you want me to tell you about him, about Alex? David thought for a moment, then shook his head. "No," he said softly. "He was the person you had to be to survive. But you're Lucia. That's the name you chose. That's the person you are now. That's the woman I love." In his acceptance, he had given me the greatest gift of all, the freedom to finally let my old self die, and to be truly, completely born.